Спасибо большое. Мы хотим вам представить Катю Деменцеву. Она тоже на школе первый раз.
I'd like to introduce Ekaterina Demintseva to you. It's first time at school. But I think that you're not the only one who came here for the first time, because every time, for every seminar, we have some new people coming. So Katya is a very active person. She has this wonderful energy that allows her to do everything. So she is a scientist, she teaches, she is a researcher, she has time just to publish her papers, and now she's writing a book, and Katya will tell you more about her research that she's doing by herself, and so she is a person of many talents: sociology, culture, history, the works. And I'm not going just to go any deeper, and I will let her talk about it. Please meet Katya, and thank you for coming. I am a little bit confused by this wonderful presentation. I did not expect to see so many faces, so many people, and I would be a little bit nervous because so a big audience, but I'm happy to be talking to you. And first, let me talk about myself a little bit, why I decided to come and what I want to tell you. So Ekaterina Demintseva, and I work at the Higher School of Economics, and for 15 years I've been involved in the research in the area anthropology, sociology, and history. Not much, though my research has to do with migrants. I used to deal with migrants because there were not many migrants in Russia, and that was the subject matter. It was not very popular. Everyone was wondering why I was doing that. But I waited, I bided my time, and I was so Arabs in France. So I was researching the migrants in Europe. And but now the subject matter has become very important, very high on the agenda for Russia, as you see. And it will be I'll be talking to you, and so this way it's related to the subject matter of migration. Aliens and versus your own citizens, strangers versus citizens, etc. What does it mean for me just to be involved in this migration subject matter? So I do not deal with issue many count the number statistics, how many migrants come. Demographers try to give statistics, how many settle down in Russia, how many go back to, and so the temporary migrants, permanent migrants. So then there are some who are involved in legal issues related to the migrant status, etc. So my activities is different. It's not even sociology; it's anthropology. Because who are those people? What do they do? What's happening to them? What they feel? What's inside? And this is and all my research when I go to people, because I have it's a qualitative analysis, not quantitative. So I come and talk to migrants. So I pick their brains, how much they long, so what they feel, live with their families, what school their children go to, what issues they are concerned with. So how they feel in the society, their attitudes, points of view. So I talk to these people, and then I put together this research. So by interviews, formalized interviews, informal interviews, I let people talk about themselves. And when I was doing this research in France, so in France it's a very important topic since 1960s. So there have been inflows of migrants, lots of inbound migrant movement, and then many scientists are involved in it. And while in Russia it was a new thing, so then in France, so there are many schools, different areas, so they deal with different issues related to migrants. Racism in the French society, then Muslims, women Muslims, fundamentalism, condition of those women, really national identity, children, etc. And when I started to do this research, I was looking what others were doing, and thus I was just replicating and looking what they do. I was doing the same. It was quite easy. It's difficult, but it was not overly difficult. It's always difficult to get people open up, because this subject matter is not closed. So they speak openly about it. So this is the subject matter which is widely discussed, articulated. It's not kept under wraps, and so the media covers it. Not only bad and good things. So they just speak about that too. And this subject matter is discussed with children. Very important to discuss this issue with children. And because this summer, this winter, I was reading lectures to 12-year-olds. And when I started to talk about migrants, so I saw their eyes dilate with horror. Why should you talk about that? But in France, so they're interested. Yes, we have some migrants, classmates. They came from migrants' family. So then we have 4 blacks, 5 Arabs, so from Eastern Europe. And so this subject is discussed very openly, and it's not a taboo for the school. And then it was much easier to do my research in France. Because so there is a lot of associations. What's an association? An association is a place where people come. So there may be different associations. So then associations of women from Morocco, association of support and help, so domestic violence association, for example. Maybe anything else. So then Algerian culture and so on. And so when I would come to those associations, I said, would you introduce myself to those people? And I want just to talk to them, and so dialogue, to come in contact, so to develop trust. And eventually, so I did my research, and so I even have a book. I don't want just to advertise it. So then, so how to be an Arab in France. So where I talk. What does it like, or does it feel like to be a stranger? Because in Europe, so there's a first, second, third generation, third wave of migrants and migration, and so my book is dedicated to those people who came from this environment, and so what happens to them, what challenges they face in Europe, and how they overcome those problems. And a couple of years ago, I started to study the issue of migration in Russia. So my task was very specific concerning Russia, to tell the society what the migrants are in Moscow. Who are they? Who are they? Because I was kind of horrified, and that I was thinking that I can't believe, so in Europe, so you can say something positive about migrants, and you can't say anything positive in Russia about migrants. And maybe it's why the media shies away from it. What's happened? Because we have no research about what they are, those guys who come to Moscow. And certainly I could not cover everything, because there are lots of people coming to Moscow, and I selected one very... so the most not sensible, no, the category of people probably susceptible, уязвимые. Okay, the most susceptible from the attacks of and I started to work with labor migrants from Central Asia, the most susceptible. So immediate response I can see in your faces, guarded And so there's a lot of so people talk only negatively about those people. So when they talk about migrants, always remember a Tajik. A Tajik or Uzbek is already just a generic name. So like in the 60s in France was an Arab. So we have too many Tajiks and Uzbeks. They live in the basements. So they work as janitors, garbage collectors. So they oust us from our jobs, and so this is what is being talked about all the time in our media. And so my task was always to show who the migrant is in the city. And so what he lives by, what he values, with whom, how. So then, has he brought his family, his kids, or alone? And does he have, because and a migrant who works from around the clock, so came only to work, and so does he have any free time? And what happens to the migrant in the city? So he lives, so because there is a myth that there is a ghetto, secluded place, they all live in ghettos. So I tried to find this ghetto, but there is no ghetto. There's no ghetto, I couldn't find it. So what they do in their free time? So where those ghettos are, what happens with those people? So the challenge of the research was, or the study, was that practically, so there was no contact with these people, no contacts at all, because while in Europe, so you could come to immigration ghetto district and find an association, the association, or for example, a club of support of migrants or whatever. You could find this establishment. In Moscow, there are no such places except 2-3 civil associations where many people come to, but they're not territorially connected, so everyone comes from any district, so different people. But I could not certainly talk only to them, and but no, like people who kind of district associations that could talk more, who lives in their districts, I couldn't find any. That was the first challenge. The second challenge was that it was last summer, my study that I did it, and last summer, remember there were elections, and so the election campaigns, they spoke about so the fighting migration. So that's to do away with migration, to clamp down, so to somehow just combat migrants. And while in 2012, so when the first pilot study was done, and people talked to me very willingly. So because kind of snowballed, so when they, so then from one to one, so I just kind of changed hands, the contacts, so from one migrant to another migrant, and they willingly talk. But even if they gave me contacts in 2013, so no, I'm not going to talk to you, no, because we're afraid. No, we're not talking to you. We're afraid because we don't know why do you need it. What's the point of talking? Who are going to talk about? What you will have heard, and so I was giving up, so I'm not ready to do it. And thus I faced the situation that we have a certain perfunctory image of what migration is, but not based on facts, but on perception of the journalists of what's happening. So that is divorced from any sense of reality. And moreover, this in our society, so this parallel life of these migrants, local migrants, they live a parallel life, and we do not intersect. And during this study, I realized that unlike European cities where they have migrants districts, so where poor people live, and so they're closed in, where a middle-class person would never go to, and so small districts in the neighborhood. Then in Moscow, so we have the big ace of a good relationship between migrations and people, because Moscow is socially mixed city. it's a melting pot that migrants live among us. So I didn't have to go anywhere just to get to talk to them, because they live everywhere. Yeah. And all I had to do is just get down to the ground floor, because janitors, garbage collectors, public social sweepers, street sweepers, so I wanted to establish a contact between the people living in the district and with locals and migrants, and there's no contact. And when I started to do that, we live two parallel lives, two parallel worlds on the same territory. And this is very interesting, because having studied is very interesting, very revealing. For example, that we have a stereotype that all migrants live only in basement or in some unknown places, squalor. Yes, squalor. No, we did study in different districts, social demographic characteristic, different districts we studied, and we did about 400 questionnaires. Only 3% of all the people said that they live in the basement or in other questionable. So all others live in apartments. They live in apartments. So they live. Certainly they rent only one bed in this apartment. So they live 10, 12 people in one room, not in one apartment. But they live in the same buildings, in the same blocks of apartments where we live. No, certainly they live just 10 to a room. Certainly they say, or they live in 5-storied old blocks of apartments. No. They live together, cheek by jowl with you, but they're very quiet, very nice, very polite, because they don't want anyone to hate them, and so they live very quietly, keep low profile. And we started asking people, do you know that who lives next to you? And are there many migrants? So yes, we have more and more migrants. But can you tell me specifically in which apartment? No one could tell where they live, and we know that there are that we have apartments that where the migrants live. We know that, but still they don't know. So that's why this fear that somewhere these unknown people living 10 to a room, and we don't know what they do. They snatch away our jobs. And so this fear does not even allow people to open their eyes and see that they live in almost the same conditions. Certainly, the more stringent conditions, because too many of them in one room, but similar conditions. And there was very interesting result of our research was that many migrants are actively using the urban space. So first, migrants have days off, right? The days off, and they actually using this urban space, and so many migrants. So they have at least 2 days off a week, and they do not just close in their district. Mixing only among themselves. So many go to the woods to make shish kebab, for example. Yeah? Shish kebab. So where do you go? So they go to different resorts, parks. So wooden nice water bodies. So the special organized for locals territories. So where the migrants go and where the locals go. So they're separated. So Moscow is a place of parallel coexistence. So there's a stretch of the beach on the bank of the water river. So where they just do shish kebab. And so many, but all parallel. So many go to shopping malls. This is a place where they love to walk. They don't buy. They don't buy, but they like to walk. So there's Afi Mall, for example, so big shopping retail center, and so a big public space, and migrants love it. And some just go for a walk, so to live the life of the city. in our study. They don't go to sort of markets, open air markets. No, they go to the same places where we go, same places. I was asking my friends. So did you see there are many migrants there? So to ask my friends. No, migrants don't go there. So let's go have a look. Let's go together. So I told my friends. So let's say went for a walk. So went to that retail center, and so this is a strange thing because their eyes opened, and so now they started to realize there are many migrants around them, but they just didn't notice them because they were not around, but they were around because we live in this parallel world, and this is what I see. That's how I look at it. Relationship in the society, and the question that has to do with tolerance and relationship. So the attitude of one community to another community, and then there was another instance which is very telling in my view. And I told you about the relationship between. So that are delineated in the modern society between the strangers and ours per se. And very often this kind of relationship is covered up. When you start asking people why actually you don't like them, why do you treat them, why do you treat them despectively, condescendingly, why is that? And then all of a sudden, so it's a strange thing start to come up to the surface. So they walk in sports pants, for example. They walk around wearing sports pants, buggy, wrinkled, disgusting sports pants. Why? And then, or they slaughter sheep. So I've never seen a sheep slaughtered in my life. So it would be interesting to go see a ram slaughtered, but I've never seen one. And so I never just kind of happened to be there when the ram is slaughtered. And then when I was reading lectures to the kids and I called my garbage collector Yusuf. Who is this? My garbage collector Yusuf, who sweeps the streets in front of my. So I'm going to talk about foreigners, all right? Who else we are going to talk about? About migrants. That's the last thing. So it came up unexpectedly because it was an unexpected subject matter for the kids that I was reading this lecture to. And tell me, just do you have those street sweepers? So a girl. So I live in a cottage village, but I'm sure you must have some sweepers or builders. Oh yes, we do have builders. Oh, so we have Mahmoud. Mahmoud is such a nice guy. So he helps my papa so much. Everything, we're in the best relationship, and his kids are great. And I'm friends with his daughter. And what about migrants? Oh no, migrants are horrible. I'm afraid of migrants. But do you realize that Mahmoud and his daughter, they're migrants? Oh yes, they're migrants, but they're good. They're different migrants. They're much better migrants. They're excellent migrants. And the adults say the same thing. And this is just on an everyday level, so the routine level. And it can happen anywhere. It can happen anywhere. So we cannot depart from it. Okay.
And that's so much for this, but certainly they will not share the position publicly. Certainly a child may just sometimes spill the bins and say whatever he heard his parents discussing, but I'm sure if you talk with the people in the street or with your parents, surely they will find a good reason why they think about people like this or that. And in Europe, what we see, even if racism is relevant as a topic, this is a topic of new racism. New racism is about, it's not that you think that a person because of the color of his skin is different, is unlike you. New racism says that people because of their cultural characteristics cannot become like you. A good example is Muslims who cannot become Europeans because of their cultural peculiarities. This is what is called cultural racism, which is now being actively discussed in Europe, and everybody thinks what needs to be done about it. This topic is very much closed right now, and it most often is discussed in, say, in small expert communities. And sometimes it becomes something on front pages, these xenophobic utterances which we heard in recent years. And the last point I wish to make is just, I would like to pay attention just a couple more minutes. The same topic, but in a broader scale. This is institutional racism. This is the attitude of the society and of the state, which project itself on people who are other, unlike us. Well, certainly what matters most is, it's very important nowadays, we have this question about integration, about we need to integrate migrants. And again, first and foremost, whom we remember first, they are Tajik migrants and Caucasians, but two categories that need to be integrated. At that, we don't even pay attention to that. There's other category whom we're referring to, and it is very upsetting when I hear all these programs that what needs to be done. Everybody immediately says that, in principle, it is a matter of cultural racism. Everybody says that, look, we need to make them come closer to culture, and something needs to be done about making them like, let them join and enter the Russian culture. Honestly, for me, a great question is, although integration is something that I use because I work for the subject, for me the matter was very interesting. To what extent you should integrate people so that you should think he is integrated? Where is this degree of integration? What needs to be done with him? And the experience of Europe, I understand there is no such thing as degree of integration, because when I speak with blacks in France, they say, look, we can't make this gesture, so we cannot erase our skin color, you know? We cannot integrate till the very end simply because they project certain stereotypes and patterns upon us. But here, a very important question is that in European countries, they realized that they need to necessarily somehow protect these people by law from this negative influence that society can exercise upon them. They should get access to healthcare. These people should get access to education, their kids, that their children, that this person, this migrant also needs being taken care of by the state, by society, and so on. And for me, certainly, the most important is the question that there exists for me, that people like this can go, say, to the prefect's office or some elsewhere, to a court, and say, look, they didn't fulfill the obligation. For example, my child was not accepted into this school. And honestly, I face these problems in Moscow when I interview people, and I realize that we can try to get these people stop wearing trainers and take off scarves of women's heads, do something about children, but if these people are not protected, they come to hospital. Just the day before yesterday, I interviewed a Kyrgyz woman. She's a gynecologist in a special clinic for Kyrgyz. And she says, I kept saying that if you, especially for a pregnant woman, if you have some pain, you should immediately call an ambulance, because you cannot wait. You can sometimes even reach me. And she's nowadays are no longer recommended to anybody, because the ambulance simply would, when they say it's a migrant, and they may not even take her with him, or they say come to hospital, they disembark them, and then they be kept there for 3 days. And I say, but what about them? They know that 3 days is something. Look, and they say, look, when you really face this immediately with people, and it's not in any way reflected on paper, and then many people use this, that these people have no rights, enjoy no rights. And this is certainly a very serious problem. And certainly, if we speak about integration of migrants, we should begin first and foremost from questions pertaining to the attitude towards these people and their legal status, so that they should understand that not only they should know our laws as well as Russian language, so that they could use them if they say got into hospital. They could say, look, I'm entitled to this and that right within 3 days for you to provide medical services for us. Well, probably I will stop at that. It was my introductory remarks. I will be happy to take questions, please. May I only add? It seems to me that in general, in this school, we don't have people who come here by chance. But now I just exchanged looked with Lena and Yuri Petrovich, and I think on behalf of all of us, I can say that I have this feeling that Katya certainly has always been with the school. And I want to thank you for this most sophisticated subject. We didn't know how to tackle it. Most difficult because of tragedy, and secondly, because of its tragic character, and secondly, because between a myth and reality there is a huge gap. There's an abyss, and there's little understanding, little knowledge, and even less, there's lightness and openness that Katya has, which she can both speak with a child and teach at a university and write research papers. And that you should understand. What is unique about Katya's experience is that first, it all is done, it's just handmade, as you can see. And secondly, her knowledge is substantiated and supported by her work, not in Russia, but also in France and Africa, if I remember correctly. So we have a unique specialist before you here. Thank you very much once again. And we now start Q&A. Thank you, Inna. And I thought when I listened to Inna, I thought that Inna was with us forever. And why is it Lena? Where is Lena? Lena is not here. Why is it that we give so few possibilities for Inna to speak? I do not really know. Inna, thank you. Dear colleagues, we begin this discussion, as you see. I suppose, Milady, it's the first time you're raising your hand. Please don't turn away. I think it's the first time you're... I'm sorry, I do not know your name yet. Manda from Mongolia. I have a question. What do you think? What can be done to ensure that in the Russian society you should have or should develop tolerance? I have several examples when Russians, their attitude towards foreigners. For example, I studied at Russian University of Friendship of Peoples, but there, for foreigners, it's impossible to live normally. Because even if a person is sick, for example, a general practitioner will not send him to the sanatorium because the doctor would say to the hospital, so not sanatorium, but to hospital, she would say, look, you're not Russian, for this reason I'm sending you, referring you, because Russian students should go there first. And when there is a certain room left there, then yes, you will be referred to in hospital, or I don't know. There is a queue, I don't know, people are queuing and walking. Foreigners also are queuing, and then some Russians come and they say, come on, I have a paper, and it doesn't really matter if you're sick or not, I have this. For a foreigner, they don't hand out these papers, and we will pay for medical insurance, but all the same we cannot get access to the same services which Russians obtain. For that matter, I think that in Russia they do not respect foreigners. And I don't know, everybody thinks that Russians are better than anybody. I don't know. This is the question. How can you improve the situation for foreigners? Thank you. Thank you for your question. Well, you know, I think it takes years to find an answer to this question. I'm sure in Europe they haven't found an answer to this question. But I have an answer as of today, and you're not the first student with whom I speak, because I have run a project. I said that I also work in Africa. I have a project dedicated to African students who studied in Soviet times and who are now studying in Moscow. And I very often face this situation. How they perceive students, especially when appearance makes them different, no matter what they are. Are they from Mongolia, from Vietnam, from Africa? Many people are really upset about these questions, about racism and about quite overt and open racism from our public, but certainly very many others face legal matters. Students, let it put you, you are in a good situation. You are more or less, your situation is regulated because you have, or you used to have, a visa and possibility there to study at least, well, some things, a visa and so on. But many migrants who travel, labor migrants, they don't have anything. And they need to buy it all, let alone many people live in whatever they buy, they have to buy on credit. And in my view, well, the first prescription I can give you is just first piece of advice is to strictly comply with and strictly observe those rules and norms and laws that are there. Certainly you should fight the corruption, but it's incredible corruption which is flourishing, and you can see that advertisements, I don't know how well spread it is in other cities, but in Moscow we can see anywhere, like medical books, insurances, and nowadays Russian language certificate, command of English. Okay. Thank you. And reasonable approach to questions. Well, didn't ban everybody's entry to Russia, I don't know. Ban children's going to schools, like going to hospitals and whatever. It is no solution. Banning something is not a solution, but a well thought of procedure that foreigners should go through. Nobody really will attend these Russian language courses for the simple reason that, well, students have only 1 year, okay, for these special, only for learning Russian, but labor migrants don't have a day because they have to work. This is what they're for. Nobody will attend these Russian courses, with the exception of, I don't know, children. They don't need these courses of Russian because they go to schools. So before they listen to those who make those laws, before they listen to people who really see this situation, and before they have regulated it, and on top of that, before we have introduced banning so that in the mass media we should stop articulating this xenophobic rhetoric, we will not reach a tolerant society. I will allow myself, in consolation for our guest from Mongolia, I would say that a trip to district polyclinic, it's a great ordeal for Russians too, trust me. And I do understand that it is sweet consolation, but bear in mind, indeed, those who haven't faced yet this system of healthcare, free healthcare, have not seen some disease, even Muscovites, they can see that even for Muscovites, ethnic Russians, that there's failure to comply with some laws about, say, free medical care. Regrettably, they're not observed by physicians, and I don't want to put the blame on the physicians here, and this is again quite egalitarian approach. Regrettably, it's is in the same way they treat you ill very much like they treat Russian citizens, in healthcare and other social services too. Although certainly there is room for improvement. A question from Poland, please. Pani Magdalena. Shop from Poland. I have two questions for you. The first question is about the scenario of these classes for children that you mentioned. My cleaning janitor, Yusuf, don't you think that it's a bit too dangerous in a sense that if you speak about migrants as people who are also human, who are ill-educated, who can do only low-paying jobs, this may lead to quite the opposite conditions when we instill and reinforce stereotypes, and instead of teaching them tolerance, we can instead see a very negative perception of such people. And you should not probably replace this genetic, just my friend, or maybe my peer, or my school friend, somebody who will enjoy a more neutral relation. And the second question is, as to have you ever compared two groups of labor migrants? What I mean is domestic labor migrants and labor migrants from other countries, for example, from Central Asia, whom you mentioned, from the perspective of your own and alien. If you compare these two groups of labor, how do they perceive by the environment where they... The first group is like people who travel from Russia to work, to find a job elsewhere, and to which extent they can really get integrated into the new environment and feel they belong there as part of this. Thank you very much for these questions. Well, Janitor Yusuf, indeed, this was really a very lengthy, long deliberation about what to call this lecture. And we were several people, and we really thought how to build it, about which lines, and how to explain it to people, and what you talk to. But I had 6 classes, and all the 6 classes were unlike one another. Why? Because each group, it saw in its own light the question of migration. And at first class, or was it at the second class, when I said, today, I made this introduction and said, but today we shall speak about migration. And immediately some 6 kids were present there. They began to discuss which of the friends left abroad. They began to discuss emigration. My aunt is in Spain, and my uncle is in America, and my friend is living elsewhere. They think that migration, it is immigration. For Moscow children, it's impossible to predict what they see migration like. They don't have any information like for European kids. They have some baseline information that next to us we see people who are unlike us. These people may be different in this and that and that. As of 3 years old, once they go to school, they tell them this: our kids do not get the stories. Whatever they hear, there's just pieces, and for one begin to discuss it in the context of emigration. The other group, we started to discuss migrants as janitors and cleaners, and I had this scenario when I spoke about at the end, shall we see amongst us people who, don't know, doctors, teachers who traveled from other countries or other regions. And they began to speak very actively. Many kids, it's Moscow middle class. Many kids get better understanding of migrations as a teacher or as a doctor, rather than, say, by the janitor, by the labor migrant for low-skilled. This is a topic they find closer to them. If I answer, I'm answering very briefly. And again, another point. It was very interesting for me to do classes, and I saw how it was done in France. In France, there are plenty of books. Like nowadays, we have at school a new girl who's now an African girl. She told us about Africa. And everybody first looked at her, and then they all became friends. Or like we have this story about the boy. They're stories about migrants' kids, beginning with book from 3-year for 3-year olds, ending with stories for more serious books. And my story was before the class, we commenced our class, I wanted to mail out so that they should learn. And I haven't found books like this. And about migration, about migrants. Like here we have people who are unlike us, about another. The only book I've found, 1991, it was published back 1991. I just contacted director of Moscow Library. She said, look, I remember 1991, there was about a cat with blue eyes who gets in a society who have yellow eyes. And the story starts, it's a very short book, and we read it at a class. This is the only, and it was never republished and re-edited. We just scanned that book and was never more published. And at that I spoke to publishers. We had very serious, these books are non-existent, and I think it's a huge something that we're really missing, and I'm trying to promote it in every way I can. Well, the domestic, internal and external, regrettably I don't have enough on me. As yet I couldn't make comparison between domestic and external migrants, and it's interesting that migrants that are visible, I mean from the Caucasus and Middle Asia, and invisible, no jargon, like perception of Ukrainians and Moldovan, who are not really very visible, and perception of, they say, Anna Uryadova. Good day, Anna Uryadova from Yaroslavl. I just have comment and support. First of all, about children's books. Excellent project that's called Respect. It may help many. Project by Goethe's Institute in Moscow, who won a grant from the EU. And they draw comics on the problem, one of our own and alien, own and alien. And they've got plenty. They're very actively working in Dagestan. About 20 or 30 comic specs, and now want an animation project here. And I hope that... Do they work in Russia? Oh, it's in Russian. It's done in Russian. They have their own program then. When they go out and they talk to kids, what problems, how do they take other children, how they accept them in their own team or not. It's actually very interesting. So this friend or foe, so it's just not another. Second is institutionally. These migrants' structures are not institutionalized. Most migrants whom you study are Muslim. And it seems to be the first thing you should do. You should go into a community, Muslim community. Yes, I'm in cooperation, I'm talking to them. The third issue about France. You cannot study migration, also study migration about Russian migration, and for a long time I lived in France, about 5 years. Cannot study migration apart from the historic situation which they live in. You're studying migration in France at this time under President who opened the doors for migration, including for Arabic. I lived in France some 10 years ago when the doors were shut and they were really igniting cars, and about Arabs too. So every time when you say this is the way it works and it's so great, it may be under this president, but you can say that it was very nicely so ago, some 10 to 15 years ago. You appealed to the 1960s, 1970s. Actually, 10 or 15 years ago, the situation was different. Yes, there were some entities, some organizations, but again, when we speak about French schools, do you speak about municipal schools, whereas most middle-class children attend private schools in, you might disagree with this, but nevertheless, most kids, they go to municipal schools. The same is true of Moscow right nowadays. I can say that in many districts we can have as many as 60% of migrants who, well, I'm just know people who work in schools, and they say, look, before kids, we learn them, we teach them something. We first to try to teach them Russian. It's actually quite a challenge for many schools in Moscow, not located in the central district, not maybe private schools. Well, at that, yes, and another comment I wish to make. You mostly study your migration, people who travel from into towns. And the project was they run when events in North Ossetia, when migrants would move to the country. And it was a major plus for a Russian village because it would then revive the Russian country. They would start their farms. And just a comment I wish to make. Well, dear colleagues, I don't recommend to it is really strange from the procedural viewpoint. No, I want to immediately respond to your comment. First of all, thank you for suggesting me this project. Regrettably, we haven't found it. I will certainly look it up. Probably we will work together here. Certainly there are communities in Kyrgyz, Uzbeks, Mahalla, or tribal community or ethnic community. I won't tell you much about this. I published an article on the website Moskop where I presented the first findings of my research. You can look it up in greater detail. I just didn't want to discuss it in my introductory words. Institutionally, you are quite right. They're not do not exist in some official form, but these communities exist everywhere. Certainly, this group of mutual help. What I mean is mutual aid. What I mean is that I cannot find. Still, we should have some things which are institutionalized, so that you could legally prove something and do something in case of violence or sexual assault, or I don't know, case of disease, or so that it's not that only your friends should help. As to history, well, certainly I work on history, not torn away from what is going on nowadays in France. I have don't wear pink glasses. What I wanted to do, I wanted to make this opposition, how society can live, where people may be protected and in some legal aspects, and society where people are absolutely unprotected. And I ran a study some 10 years ago. Well, certainly, well, I'm not really sharing with you this story in great detail. Back in the 1980s, in French school, a French teacher could say, "You brainless Arab, come on, this is something they cannot do." A teacher cannot swear at and abuse a student using racist remarks. It will not be a student, it will be a teacher who would be reprimanded and disciplined. There are some suburbs where you cannot enter, not being, but it's not a matter of ethnicity. It's not a matter of that there are a huge number of migrants. No, in this you have the poor who are unemployed. These are the European matters which nowadays they're now looking at how to resolve them. About 60% of migrants, please, could I show me their schools? I will go there because neither of any studies that I've run, Institute of Demography, Institute of Sociology, we haven't found schools like this. And there's kids, I've spoken to these kids in Europe and in Russia. Well, in 6 months they get perfect command of Russian, these kids. And if a teacher is normal, I mean, she's not biased, has no prejudices, then she doesn't care whether it is ethnically a Russian or Uzbek child. This child would, will fit normally into this class. And I think we are just, sometimes we want to frighten ourselves. Don't tell me that you've got friends, or please give me a school number and I'll go there.
Question from Luda Klimovsk of Ulyanovsk. Thank you very much for your presentation. But I wonder if we can ruin those stereotypes you have identified, and the society is prepared to do so. And what's the attitudes of the migrants to those stereotypes? I repeatedly stated in my presentation that unless we do something in public, unless we refer to some friends, to some rumors, and accusing us of carrying out not trustworthy research, I'm prepared, to go specifically to such a location to make a site visit. So if we give up the rhetoric and the fear of imposing stereotypes, and I don't think that we will address the issue fully, but I think we will relieve the tension that we see in the society. When some sophisticated people tell me that migrants are crowding in my neighborhood and I'm afraid of going into the streets, I hear such statements, and that fear is based on the assumptions that those people are portrayed as criminals. And I think that we need to give up that rhetoric first. What shall I do? You are in the back. My name is Blazhenka, and I came from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Blazhenka, I wished I could see you, and now I'm seeing you. Can civic society do some projects so that to enhance tolerance of the people towards migrants? When I lived in my country, I worked for 3 years in human rights organizations, and we performed specific projects. We conducted seminars that were attended by children, citizens of Bosnia, and children of gypsies. And we got together, we were networking, we were interacting, so we wanted to make the society tolerant and to reduce those prejudices. I wonder if there are any projects of the kind underway here in Russia. Well, I can think of some projects that are starting in this country. In Moscow since last October. I've been meeting with people, with various federal organizations such as the Moscow Department of Culture, meeting people representing some private organizations. Recently, a person from a museum from some neighborhood came to me and discussed plans of some projects. Moscow libraries also try to get in touch and ask what to do. But, the problem is that most of those people come to me and ask for a recipe. And it's popular now to visit an expert. I'm pleased with that, believing that I'm an expert. But I suggest we think together, we join the effort, and they cannot understand why, because they think that if I'm an expert, I have a recipe. But it's not the case, and we are looking for some opportunities. And my colleague from the Institute of Oriental Studies, they are starting a project of having or serving dinners in the backyards. They invite migrants, they lay the table, every person brings some food. But again, it's part of the Moscow-wide program, but at least finally migrant is in the focus of attention. Finally, we realize that we are living in that kind of a society which is changing, which is not like the one that we had before, and we need to interact. Well, the examples that I gave to you are just very few, and fingers of two hands are enough to count them, and so they are not very popular because they are only beginning. And focusing on kids, it's nice to hear that some kids programs are organized. Enlightenment educational programs that are offered for migrants, and I'm asked to participate in such programs, and I'm happy that we have some examples. Alexander. I'm Alexander Shitov from the Pskov. I was smiling not because anything was funny, but because you really read my mind. I'm researching migration, and I'm researching actors of the migration policy. I research access to health care for migrants. The problem is that illegal migrants, and talking about illegal migrants, because according to the law, all the migrants have access to the health care, but the government is making such a framework which make in other words, illegal migration is more favorable for them than the legal migration, because they don't have to pay money for visas, for quotas, so illegal migration is much broader than the legal one. I don't know what do you mean by illegal migration? Those who live in the territory of Russian Federation without proper papers, without visas, without permission to work, those who come to the Belarusian station, they are taken by a bus, brought to some construction site, and then walk there. You mean illegal migrants are those who enter into the country illegally? No, there are a few of them because they don't need visa. We are talking about people who are in the irregular situation. They come to the country on a legal basis, but they work without proper documents, proper permissions. Okay. You told us about the projects, and Blazhena made a point about their projects. From Tajikistan, I mentioned the 2-3 funds I work with. Can you think of any other? I think the problem is that the civil initiatives of non-profit organizations are not supported at the institutional level. They are participating in the round table, they are asking, let me do so and so. State structures, why should we do that? We are well off without that. And the question is that the Ganushkin and the Civil Cooperation Committee suggest that for migrants there will be a single center, say hospital. I think you were talking about the Mayak Center when we were talking about Kyrgyz doctors. So then Ganushka and Hadjiraeva, they deny that idea because they say if we establish that single center, specialized, Tajiks, nationality-specific centers, then it will be ridiculous. It will take time. Looks like if we built that for individual nationalities, then it will not be integration into society. So do you think that we need to establish a single center for all nationalities, or shall we integrate migrants into the Russian hospitals? That's a very important question for me, because I'm faced with that as a researcher. Thank you. You know, there are some situations when there is emergency, and you need to take a person to the nearest hospital, and I think it's every other situation. So naturally, I don't think that government should not think of nation or nationality-specific center for individual nationalities. But I'm aware of some private initiatives, a clinic for Kyrgyz people and centers for migrant aid, and I think it's quite okay, and I think the government should give equal chance for all people who live in the country to enjoy those elementary social benefits, so that if you get sick, you can come to the nearest hospital. But certainly all those things with insurance are to be straightened. I am not dealing with this particular aspect, but I don't think that it would be appropriate to establish some secured or segregated areas for migrants. Any person should enjoy those social services that are offered. People or children should go to kindergarten, to school. If they are public, if it is a private initiative, certainly you can establish a Kyrgyz kindergarten or school if there are sponsors ready to pay for that. We have some well-off people from Armenia, from Azerbaijan, so they can really open private schools, and schools of that kind exist in France or United States, but every child living in the country should be granted an access to public services, to all public services. I think I answered your questions. Please, a colleague from Armenia. Thank you. Many people want to leave the country based on the premise that it's somewhere there is a country of their dream, they'll get there and all their requirements will be met there. I wonder if you researched on that, and or what do those people feel when they arrive, and if their dreams do not come true, why they do not come back to their countries of origin? Let me remind you of the fact again, because I'm talking about a target group. That's the labor, migrant, guest workers. And those are the really labor migrants, irrespective of the country of origin. And it's less a myth now, because when in 1960s, when Arabs were coming to France or Turks coming to Germany, they really believed they would go into the country of their dream. But now we have the internet, and many labor migrants talk to their families through Skype. They show the apartment they live in, and not many people have that kind of fundamental disappointment. So they realize that they are not going to heaven, and your decision is made by the premise that you come to the country, you work hard, and you will be patient just to make some money. And people we talk to, their first response is that we are tired. And when they live under that conditions, when you are never alone, you don't have home, you always have some neighbors, people do not look at you well, so you are under pressure. And some of them are leaving. And just not because they cannot tolerate any longer, but they make plans, say, to make money to buy a car, and if they make that money, they get back. But some people come to make money for wedding, and probably no migrants bring their children because they cannot accommodate them. So it's nostalgia about children, but they think that I will work hard, I will be missing my children, but I'll make some money so that my kids are educated. One of my aides, a Kyrgyz by origin, he'd been living in Moscow for 8 years. His wife and him are living in a cabin, at the checkpoint at some parking lot or what. And he says that still we made money to pay for the education of my daughter. One daughter already graduated from the law school. And perhaps when we provide education for the second daughter, the first daughter, the older daughter, will pay for the third daughter, and then we'll be able to get back home. Question from Khabarovsk. Marina Ilyushenko from Khabarovsk. Thank you very much, Ekaterina, for that research. Frankly speaking, it's my first time I hear of the research of that kind. In Khabarovsk, we have a center that was established on the initiative of the Orthodox Church, and migrants come there to study Russian. It's been in operation for the second year. Many migrants would like to go there, but there are only 2 teachers of Russian language. I cannot teach everybody. So the teaching course is 1 year. But the teachers work on a voluntary basis, and they are really eager to help those people get integrated. You cannot get integrated if you don't speak the language of the country, no matter what laws and regulations are passed. We had an accident in Khabarovsk. One woman came to Khabarovsk from Uzbekistan with her husband, and she delivered a baby, and doctors didn't allow her to feed her baby. And they were telling her that we will not let you feed the baby until you pay for that service. And then I read comments in Facebook, and people read that on the one hand it's terrible, and on the other hand, and those people in hospital, nurses, they are not paid much, and perhaps there is some fund of social insurance or some other organizations that can help in this particular case, or is it that no one can help and intervene here? So news that I hear is always sad, but there should be some way out, you know. I would comment on the Russian language and integration. I've never heard of any Orthodox Church courses. I will try to confirm, but anyway, neither my colleagues nor I never learned anything about that. As for the Russian language and integration, on the one hand, I can agree with you that if you come to the country, you need to speak the language. But say somebody comes to work for a year, if you make money to buy something you desire, and if you work as a sweeper, and by the way, in among those sweepers, cleaners, there is also segregation. Sweepers, cleaners, then checkpoint operators, and they work for a year and just. Do you think they have time to study Russian? But those who come for longer than 1 year, certainly they need to. If you take a decision to stay in the country, you need to take certain steps. If you come as a temporary worker, it's different. Okay, it's a long story. I'm not going to speak about that at length, but I don't think that all immigrants need to speak Russian. Okay, so it's not mandatory. What was your second question? That's because you are misleading the expert. You don't let the expert answer. You keep on adding. And Ekaterina got distracted. And dear colleagues, if you ask a question, just listen to the answer. Stop from intervening. Medical care, health care. I think that it's not only the issue for migrants or about migrants. That's the responsibility of the government to pay decent salaries and wages to doctors, nurses, and staff, hospital staff, because any Muscovite can find themselves in such a situation. So it's, I don't think that this is the question to me only, and I can only hope that sooner or later the government will start hearing what the expert community says. And, my research is published, and I am not certain if any conclusions are made based on that research. And as you say that in research we have covered a number of areas, and certainly I wish those doctors and nurses could earn more money, but it's criminal when you don't let mother feed baby. Good afternoon. I'm Viktor Ibragina from Kyrgyzstan. Thank you very much for dealing with the migrants' issues. You made a point about the Mayak hospital. That's correct, and the union of various nationalities, and for them there is a single medical establishment. I think such initiatives are to be supported by the state. Speaking of migrants' children, and personally I saw a case that even when kids are adopted to kindergartens, they are segregated, and migrants' kids are segregated from Russian kids, but I wonder if the state is doing any effort so that later on, when those kids become citizens of the Russian Federation, that could really feel like citizens. Perhaps I have different experience. My kid went to the kindergarten. We had 2 Kyrgyz kids in the kindergarten. They were not friends. He had other friends, but that 2 Kyrgyz kids, they made friends with other Russian boys, and there was no segregation. It's a multi-level thing. In Europe, in the 1980s, we saw the situation when there were teachers saying, and nobody made them in 1970s, 1980s, but they kept on saying that we have children from various countries, various nationalities, and they tried to demonstrate to the kids that there was no segregation. Perhaps it was the kindergarten where my kid went to was good because the teachers were responsible people, and they were kids from different countries and nationalities, from Georgia, from Slovenia, and who came without knowing Russian language, but at the graduation party all of them were singing songs in Russian. And I met with Kyrgyz children, and they switched from one school to another, and they had to leave because the teacher was very tough at them. But at another school, they were really happy with another teacher, and with admiration they were telling me about very interesting lessons and cultural events they take. So again, a lot has to be made. So far we can see initiative only on the part of individual teachers, and there is no centralized governance or management, and it's something that is human. Perhaps there is a teacher who can read something bad about Kyrgyz, and they will start torturing those kids at school. In her class, but there could be some others who could really behave well and treat well those Kyrgyz kids. And again, that brings me to my earlier point that there is too much negative things about migrants in our media. Timur, the floor is yours. I'm Timur Uzhakov from Ingushetia Republic. Thank you very much, because I have really something to say. I would like to make a remark about France. Some 7 or 8 years ago, when Mr. Sarkozy was elected president, and in Paris, my friends and I were discussing the situation with migrants, and Sarkozy was elected exactly at that point, and he was negatively tuned to migrants. And some of my French told me that they had some historical feeling of blame before Arabs, because they were used to be their colonies. So French officials attempt to close their eyes to some cases of riots and unrest. In Russia, we don't have such complexes. We don't have such a feeling. When we try to search for ways, I was raised in the Russian Far East, and I grew with people, with kids from all the republics of the Soviet Union. And sometimes I'm in the company when people begin saying that those bad guys from the Caucasus, and they stop and they look at me, and then they say, Timur, but you are a Caucasian, but you are like we are. So I think that it's really a long effort, and so that at school and kindergartens we really have to work very hard. And so that if later on somebody comes to the country speaking a different language, we will not be scared. I would speak of a negative example of North Ossetia. I was born, and there was a prigorодny area, and in 1992 there was a massacre. It didn't last long, but repercussions are still felt, and those implications are supported by the fact that in that prigorодny neighborhood schools there is segregation. So Ossetians and Ingush children, they go to different schools. Russian kids can go to any kind of schools, both to Ossetin or Ingush schools. And you know, it happened, that massacre happened in 1992. More than 20 years have passed, and still there is strong ethnic tension. Although people live very close, they, actually live together, but their kids go to separate schools. I don't think that I have to comment on that. I fully agree with you. I agree that it's in school where people can mostly get integrated, and I cannot agree more. So about the complex of guilt in French people, perhaps there is an idea that there is a complex of guilt, but those implications you mentioned are not based on that. I think it's based on the fact that French society is now a multinational society. In 1990s, when the second generation of migrants came, and the original French realized that now there were people of different race, color, who were also French citizens, and something had to be done. And it's not because they have some feeling of guilt, but because those children, they walk across the same streets and go to the same schools. And when people ask if we really need tolerance and hate being heard about your European experience, and there are cries that we need to really let them all go away, first I try to tell those people that Russia is a multinational country. We have Caucasus, we have Tatarstan, we have many other national republics. And in my research, and I have very narrow selection, and I can see that there are so many people now who used to be migrants, but who have already become full-fledged Russian citizens. And we had some people with Russian citizenship who acquire that citizenship just to get a fair, a decent job. Because you cannot be employed well if you don't have a Russian passport.
In the same way, people can be kicked out because they don't have Russian citizenship. So it is not really about a Kyrgyz person, but a doctor or any other person may literally refuse rendering a service, and not only to a Central Asian, but even to the Russian of Russians, only on the basis of a personal dislike. There are many people who have Russian citizenship, having come from other countries, other cultures, other religion, people with other attitudes and the history of attitudes that run for generations in their families, that have acquired the Russian citizenship and need indeed be treated equally. Colleagues, if you take a look at your watch face, you'll have to contain your questions, because the time's up. I think that this has been a very interesting, a very good session, as we have been able to talk to a person who deals with practical matters. This is not just because we are discussing theory. Theory is also a requirement, but theory has to be supplemented with practice. And the fact that Ekaterina Borisovna was able to tell us this story, I think, is excellent. The one thing I'm a little bit concerned with is some refutation of the practice. This is not good. When you refuse the practical, when you refuse and refute the empirical things, then indeed this is not safe. Before we thank the expert, I would like to give the floor to Inna Berezkina for just a moment, and I would like to first thank Inna for having secured our expert's participation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ekaterina. Just two short comments. I have been with this school for 8 years, and it is very unusual for me to take part in a discussion. First, because I think that this is because of my maybe my personal disposition, and also because I think that I'm not mature enough to participate in your discussions, and I continue to learn. And the second thing I would like to say is something that Katya mentioned, and something that we all communicate. I always heard two things between the lines. There is the other, and there are those who are different from us. And I have no other way but to respect that other, but to respect that alien. And then there is the law, which is equal to me and to the alien, or to the other. What I would like for this idea to sound, and that it really threads all of our sessions, irrespective of the fact of if we talk about history, literature, or the law. And indeed, we do arrive at the law in the end of all ends. Thanks. Ekaterina Borisovna, we hope for your future participation in our seminars.